Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Boconfuso. I'm the president of the UIDP, which is hosting this webinar series with Iowa State University. We're very pleased to be able to offer this webinar on a National Science Foundation Industry Cooperative Research Center entitled Multifunctional Integrated System Technology, or better known as MIST. You'll hear from several representatives from this IUCRC today, and they will provide you a great deal of information about the program, and hopefully you'll glean enough information to want to follow up with them to learn more. Some logistical information. Today's webinar will provide you an opportunity to ask questions in real time during the webinar. You can type your questions into the Q&A box located on the right side of your screen. We will sequence those questions and ask the panelists at the end of the webinar to provide answers to those questions. In the event they're unable to do it in real time, we will do our best to follow up with you to ensure that you get a response to your question. We also know that webinars sometimes present logistical challenges with regard to audio, and there are two ways to connect, either through your computer or you can use the information shown on your screen to connect with your phone. This information was also provided to you in an email. Finally, we will be recording today's webinar, as we are with all of the IUCRC webinars, and we'll be posting those with the slides after the event. These will then be available for you to review, share with others in your organization, and generate additional questions or comments that you may have for the IUCRC hosts. Just a quick disclaimer, while the UIDP and Iowa State are hosting this webinar series, this is not UIDP materials that you'll be seeing, and it doesn't represent the official positions of anyone within the UIDP. So you can please read that disclaimer at your leisure. So we'll begin today's webinar series, which will be led off by Shelby Powell, who is the Center Coordinator for the MIST Center. Shelby will then introduce several other lead investigators for the center. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shelby.
I am the MIST Center Coordinator, and I am pulling up my slides for you to view now. First, I would like to introduce our Deputy Director, David Arnold, and then our Director, Toshi Nishida. David is the George Kirkland Engineering Leadership Professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here at the University of Florida. Hello. And Toshi is Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Engineering and Professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I will now hand the baton to Toshi, who will describe the vision of the MIST Center.
Thank you, Shelby. I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's MIST Center webinar on MIST for MIST computing. Let me first define the name of the MIST Center. MIST stands for Multifunctional Integrated System Technology, which describes the enabling and differentiating hardware for Internet of Things smart systems. MIST Center is an NSF Industry University Cooperative Research Center. In this webinar, we'll describe the vision for the MIST Center, emerging trends in IoT, why companies join, how the center functions, and the value proposition for the center. We are an early-stage research sandbox for developing next-generation smart systems in the Internet of Things era. With the exponential rise of the smartphone in the last decade, enabling billions of people to be connected to the Internet, the Internet of Things is a logical extension of the smartphone. It does not take too much imagination to realize that the impact of the Internet of Things on society is enormous. It's clear that the Internet of Things smart systems are affecting and changing the way we do things and has the potential to do so much more. We already have many examples of wearable electronics, such as the Fitbit and other smartwatches, internet-connected automobiles, GPS monitors, and there are many efforts for smart systems, or more generally known as smart X, where X includes consumer, energy systems, healthcare, automotive and aerospace, as well as electronic systems. So where are the future opportunities and what technologies need to be developed to harness them? Many opportunities are driven by solving technological challenges. What are the challenges for the continued growth of IoT, and how is the MIST Center addressing some of these challenges? Recently, in March of this year, the National Institute of Standards and Technology published a special publication, 500-325, titled Fog Computing Conceptual Model. A panel of experts evaluated approaches to handle the exponential growth of the IoT. Speaking of the exponential growth, report states that deployment of smart internet-connected devices is estimated to reach 50 billion units by 2020. And regarding challenges, they note that new concepts and technologies are needed to manage this growing fleet of IoT devices. One of these new concepts is MIST computing, and the MIST Center is developing MIST for MIST computing. Let's see how. This graphic in the NIST special publication illustrates the IoT ecosystem ranging from the end devices, the smart devices such as smartphones and smart systems, which are represented by the yellow, green, blue, and orange geometric shapes at the bottom, which transmit data all the way up to the cloud. The time it takes to transmit the data to the cloud is called the latency. To reduce the latency, the concept of an intermediate layer called fog computing was proposed by Cisco in 2013 to bring computing closer to the edge of the network. Recently, a new concept, MIST computing, was proposed, which merges computing and the end device to reduce the time delay even further. The thrust areas of the MIST Center focus on the hardware technologies that enable MIST computing. MIST computing means computing at the sensor node. It means a SmartX MIST node, which requires several key enabling technologies. Our center is developing the key technologies needed for such a smart node for MIST computing, including sensing, computing, wireless, power, and their integration. David will next talk about the strategic roadmap for the MIST Center to help our member companies, as well as new member companies, realize their needs for smart systems and MIST computing. David.
Thank you, Toshi. This graphic here represents our strategic roadmap for the center, and this has been developed over the course of the 4 years of our center existence. It's structured to kind of illustrate how we feed technology to our member companies. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the basic idea here is on this vertical axis is we have the fundamental research topics that are fueled by the expertise of our faculty and students at our university sites. These include sensing, integration, wireless, computing, and power sources. So these individual technologies are fused together to form system platforms or system technologies such as a wearable device or an Internet of Things node, a smart sensor network, or this MIST computing concept. These systems, in collaboration with our industry members, are then input into products that eventually promulgate out into society in industry sectors such as automotive, industrial, aerospace defense, healthcare, agriculture, consumer electronics, and more. The pie chart on the right represents kind of our not market share, but our presence and strength of the center in these different industry sectors based on our center memberships. I want to take a minute to also explain the NSF IUCRC model. This is a program at NSF, and the overall arching goal of these centers is to help transition fundamental research discoveries at a university through the valley of death into product sales for industry members. As many of us know, a lot of great ideas are invented at universities, and it takes time, energy, and effort and funding to transition across this valley. So the purpose of the IUCRCs, which are fueled and funded by NSF, is to help bridge this transition. The way the IUCRC works is the university sites, in our case we have 3, and we will talk about them a little bit more later, input ideas, students, faculty, and others into the center. The member companies purchase memberships, and we pool the membership dollars to fund a portfolio of projects that are executed on an annual basis. The project idea generation and selection is through a very standardized process that we use, which we can explain later if there's questions. The way the center functions is on an annual cycle. In December, we have our large meeting, typically here in Gainesville, Florida, and at this meeting, new project proposals are proposed and voted on and selected by our member companies. Starting January 1st, all of our teams of students and faculty get to working on these new project ideas. So they work for several months, then we have a mid-year spring meeting, which rotates between Orlando and Virginia and Gainesville. At this meeting, we provide a mid-year project update on the technical advancements, as well as just an opportunity to network with students, faculty, and member companies. Sometimes there's course corrections, and feedback is always collected at these meetings in a continuous cycle for process improvement. The refined projects scopes will be continuing to be worked on for the remainder of the year, and at the end of the year, we meet again in December and present the final project results for the last year's project, and also select the new projects for the coming year, and this cycle iterates on an annual basis. So the MIST Center leadership team, as I mentioned, is at 3 sites. On the call today, as you've already heard from Toshi Nishida, I'm David Arnold here. At University of Florida, we have about 40 faculty who are in our stable of expertise, who have deep technical expertise across a number of fields, which we'll see in a minute. University of Central Florida is led by Peter Yuan and Joe Cho. And at University of Virginia, our 3rd site, Avid Ghosh and Patrick Hopkins. Shelby Powell, who introduced us earlier, is our center coordinator, and he facilitates seamless coordination across the 3 sites and with NSF and our member companies. So between the 3 schools, we have over 80 academic participants active in the center working on research projects at any given time. This includes faculty, doctoral students, master's students, even undergraduate students. We span 5 different departments, including electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, chemical engineering, and others. And a key feature of our center is that these 3 institutions tap into enormously large engineering student populations. Between our 3 universities, we have access to over 23,000 engineering students. So there's a deep talent pool for human resources, which is another attractive draw for member participation. Our faculty are also very highly decorated with a number of high-profile awards and accolades and fellowships in member societies and others. To give you a little more granularity in our research capabilities, we won't go through these individually, but you can get from this chart how we take technologies and categorize them into our 5 thrust areas. In sensing, for example, we have expertise in chemical sensors, imaging sensors, MEMS and NEMS, and more. And you can see in other areas a variety of technologies ranging down into power for energy harvesting and storage, power electronics, and others. So in this pool of expertise spans more faculty than are currently funded in the center. But it gives you some idea of the next generation technologies that we bring to the table that we hope to eventually fuse into future products through collaboration with our member companies. At this time, I want to hand it over to Shelby Powell to talk about some more of the value of the center.
Thank you, David. So the MIST Center provides value primarily in 3 distinct categories that we call the 3 R's: research, recruiting, and relationships. So as David alluded to earlier, the NSF IUCRC model is such that intellectual property in the MIST Center is really an all-you-can-eat buffet of sorts. A single membership permits access to all of the IP being generated within the center. And for example, this year we have 18 active projects. So while you're likely to have one project that you really champion, you can choose to participate and collect IP from any of the remaining 17 projects. In terms of recruiting, our 3 sites have 23,000 engineering students combined. Participation in the MIST Center means you'll have at least monthly calls with 1, 2, maybe more graduate level students. It's basically a try before you buy type scenario. In addition to student relationships, engaging with the MIST Center provides unparalleled and regular access to subject matter experts in fields already of interest to your organization. We currently have 16 members that have bought into the vision and value of the MIST Center. What's more, our member retention is incredibly good. We've only had 2 companies that have joined and are not presently members, and that's for various reasons like company reorgs and such. Companies find value here and stick around for the long haul. Memberships range from large multinational organizations to privately held to publicly held companies, government labs, and even small businesses with less than 200 employees. Here's a quick snapshot of the MIST Center now in its 4th year. We have $2 million of total direct research expenditures, and what's really exciting about that is 93% of our membership fee goes directly toward funded research. The NSF grant helps us cover a lot of the overhead, so membership dollars are spent very efficiently. We have 30 undergrad students that have participated in the center. We have 10 pending patents. One of the neat things about participating in the center is that member companies get pre-publication reports submitted to them, and we've had 48 such reports submitted to our IAD. We also have 78 graduate students in the center. As I mentioned earlier, we have 16 members and 2 alumni. All said and told, we've completed or are in process of working on 50 total projects, and we have 4 licenses generated from the IP, excuse me, within the center. I mentioned earlier that our member companies have a high degree of satisfaction through their center participation. And here's a quick testimonial from Boeing Technical Fellow Jim Underbrink. Partnership with the MIST Center delivers high-value research on strategic projects that matter to Boeing. Jim is also our immediate past IUB chair and has provided a lot of leadership that has helped distinguish ourselves and our center from other IUCRC centers. We've loved working with Boeing, but we're even more excited about growing their business and providing value. We're currently in the process of transitioning MIST Center-developed aeroacoustic pressure sensors to Boeing, which should lead to more quiet and fuel-efficient flights. And that's definitely one of the values of participating in the center is this type of technology transfers. So in summary, the MIST Center provides many strategic advantages. We help your organization adapt and embrace technological change with almost no overhead. Your return on investment scales with the growth of the center, but currently a $50,000 membership has approximately a 16-to-1 leverage factor in terms of IP alone. That doesn't include the value of networking with subject matter experts or the more than 23,000 engineering students within the center. So why MIST? We bring together the tools for integrating sensing, computing, wireless, and power technologies at each node to achieve MIST computing. We're a value-driven organization that wants to make your dreams reality, and we have a proven mechanism in place to spin up those dreams at a fraction of the cost it takes to do it in-house. So if you've liked what you heard today, and you should, we'd like to invite you to the MIST Center's fall meeting, which will be held on December 12th here at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. Registration is open now, and if you would like to, you can visit our website at mist-center.org/meeting. It's completely free, food will be provided, but you must register, and for non-member companies, a non-disclosure agreement is required. That's a painless process, a pretty sample form, and we'll be happy to coordinate that with you. But we would love to see you there. If you have any questions, we look forward to taking those offline, or online rather. And with that, we conclude our presentation today.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Team MIST. This is a great time for our participants to submit questions that we can ask of the representatives about the center and how it operates, and any questions you may have about specific technical areas of research that they're looking to pursue. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, perhaps I can start the question section of this webinar by asking for you all to give a little bit more detail about the intellectual property management associated with any foreground intellectual property that's emanating from the research that you all conduct.
Yeah, this is David Arnold. I can speak to that. It's quite straightforward. Any IP that's developed during the course of a funded research project within the center, the way it works is the center agreement ensures that all center members at that time have option to execute rights to license that technology in a non-exclusive, royalty-free manner. So we have a process in place. If there's a IP event, say here at University of Florida, we will notify all of our member companies. We give them a certain timeline to exercise or at least initiate or engage with our technology licensing office about a possibility or interest in potential license. After that time period expires, if there is only if there's multiple companies that are interested in the technology, they of course can execute a simple license to use the technology. If there is an exclusion, if there's only one member company who is interested in the technology, they can also then negotiate a royalty-based exclusive license, which can provide very high value to a company. And at the end of the day, if none of our member companies are interested in the technology, then it reverts back into our normal university IP portfolios. So I hope that answered the question. There's lots of entanglement with foreground or background IP and other things, but it probably is hard to address unless on a specific case-by-case basis.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have a question about the current members of the center and whether or not there's interest in infrastructure development and protection, bridges, roads, et cetera.
So if I understand the question, this is Toshi Nishida. The question appears to be related to an area of structural health monitoring. If that's the case, there are faculty here, as well as at the other member sites, who are actively involved in research for developing sensor networks for monitoring the safety of infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and structures.
Okay. All right. So we have another question having to do with how companies would view membership in the center. And this is obviously based on your experience. The question is it a membership rather than a research investment or research contract or research agreement? Obviously, every company has their own way of doing this, but do you all have a general sense of how companies treat the financial investment they're making into the IUCRC program in terms of how they categorize it?
Yeah, great question. This is David Arnold again. There's a couple parts that I want to say regarding that. Many companies, large companies, actually can leverage internally support from their university relationship department because some of the activities and part of the benefit and value of the center is student recruiting. So I will say up front that some of our companies use internal research and development dollars, but some also leverage other programs within their organization to pull some money, say, from their HR departments. Now, that being said, most companies do view this as a very multifaceted relationship and actually a very extensive relationship. There's a lot of bang for the buck. And what I mean for that is if a company wanted to execute a research program with me as an individual PI or at the University of Florida, typically they would go through a process of negotiating a one-on-one research contract with the university. Our universities will charge a very standardized, federally negotiated overhead rate, typically 50 to 55%, on top of the actual direct research expenses. One major benefit immediately of joining the center is that there's a cap on the overhead that the universities are allowed to charge, and that cap is at 10% instead of 50+%. So right away, even if you had sole interest in only working with one faculty member, for example, you get a better leverage on your research investment. But more than that, what our member companies often find is that they might begin a relationship with one faculty member, but as they come to the meetings and start to learn about the other capabilities of the 40, 50, 60 different faculty members and all their student teams, they suddenly discover there's an enormous amount of value or leverage in that membership dollars. And so that was the 16-to-1 leveraging that we were describing earlier. From pure numbers, you make a $50,000 investment in a research project that is of very high value to your organization. Very commonly, our member companies are interested in more than one project. So for that single investment, you might be getting real research return at varying levels of interest across multiple different projects in multiple different research areas.
Okay, thank you for that insightful response. A question, a very kind of logistical, operational question, has to do when people join or conduct research through the center. Is the agreement the agreement that people sign to do to join the center, is it with one university, or is it with all three?
That's a great question. So we actually operate on a one-center model. We have a memorandum of understanding with all three sites. And so when you sign your membership agreement, you sign that at one university, but you have access to all the IP generated at the three universities. So should there be some technology transfer or IP transfer, then we will handle that negotiation amongst ourselves as the university ecosystem and work with you on a company basis to transfer that technology.
Okay, thank you so much.
That being, one other point would be that member companies may join multiple sites, and in which case they would sign agreements with multiple universities. But the entry point, as Shelby mentioned, is one university, which provides access to the entire center.
Okay.
Yeah, to add to that, some of our member companies actually do purchase multiple memberships, and the reason is they want to fund more research in multiple projects and derive greater value from the center.
Okay, which I guess takes me to a question for a prospective member. If I was represented a company that was interested in joining the center, how would I be able to ensure that a research project of specific interest to our company that falls within the confines of what the center is doing is undertaken within the center's activities? Right.
That's a very common question. Let me invert the question. And the concern for a company is if I buy this membership, is my project going to get selected? That's a different way of asking it, perhaps.
Exactly.
So we at some level, contractually, we don't provide a statement of work when you sign the membership agreement. And I should also mention this membership agreement we keep referring to. This is a fairly short document that has been developed by National Science Foundation over the last 30 years that this IUCRC program has been in existence. And we follow the standard agreement from NSF with no deviation or exception, and all members have to sign the very exact same membership agreement regardless of which site they join. And we can certainly provide, in fact, the document is on our webpage that you can view yourself. But I think the question, now that I've skipped my mind, was
basically, how do you ensure?
Oh, how do you ensure you get a project selected? So our selection process is been streamlined and honed over the years, but essentially member companies vote. If you buy a $50,000 membership, you get 50 votes. And so we put all the projects up on a board, so to speak, and member companies cast their votes onto the projects of interest. Some companies choose to put all 50 votes on one project, and that pretty much guarantees that that project will get selected in the down selection process. What many companies do, however, is they'll put a bulk of their chips on their primary interested project. In my example, let's just say they put 35 chips or 35 votes on one project, and then they would spread the remaining 15 votes around in other projects. So in short, the way we determine which projects are selected, we sort the projects ranked from most votes to least votes, and we start at the top and clearly start funding with the funds we have available, the most highly ranked projects. And then we start from the bottom, and projects that got one vote or no votes or a few votes, we start to cut. Interestingly, we allow companies who put votes on projects that were not selected to then reallocate those votes onto other viable projects. So this process is done in real time. It's something similar to an NFL draft or something, and that helps ensure companies through this iterative process get their project selected. There's also some guiding principles that were established early on in our center. The very first principle of the project selection process is that every company should walk away with their top project funded. The second principle is that every company should walk away with one of their secondary projects funded. The third principle has to do on the back end is that all the project monies that's been collected at each of the university sites should be reflective of the project load or the funded projects at that site. That's more on our end. And in the years that we've had the center operational, we've been able to meet these kind of design constraints, and typically all of our member companies walk out with more value than the $50,000 they walked in with.
Okay. Thank you for that response. So, in effect, while contractually no one is ensured that a project is undertaken, if you take your 50 points and you put it on a project, to date, no project with 50 points has ever been denied to be undertaken, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. So I think that's the point at hand. So,
yeah, and we see this commonly in our member companies. When they first join, it's a new process, it's a new relationship. Very, very often, a company puts all their votes on one project because they've typically have nurtured a personal relationship with one of the faculty members in our center. That's a very common way for member companies to join. But in the second and the third year, we start to see them, again, go with this strategy of putting enough chips on one project to know that it likely will be selected, and then spreading their votes around as they start to see the additive or exponential benefits across the sites.
Okay, thank you. So a question has to do with the students. So you've been this is your fourth year, if I'm correct. How many of your students, or do you track the students that have worked on projects who have then subsequently been hired by your companies? Is that something that you all have done, or do you have data on that, or is it anecdotal? I guess, can you reflect on hiring from your center?
Yeah, so we do track that. Our center being, fairly young in its age, we clearly have certainly one PhD student who worked on a misfunded research project and then was hired in to a member company. So these aren't large numbers. Taking and earning a PhD is a very long process. However, we do have many examples of undergraduate students and graduate students doing internships at our member companies. In fact, very recently, just 2 weeks ago, we received a supplemental grant from NSF that helps provide additional funding to support internships of our students at our member companies. So it's a very dynamic environment, and our goal absolutely is to pipeline our students into our member companies. We also help our member companies each year. Actually, at both of our fall and spring meetings, we solicit from our companies all active job postings that are related to our technology portfolio. We put those together in a packet and deliver that to all the faculty and students in the center so they get kind of targeted marketing of those positions. And then on the flip side, we also collect from our students all of their resumes and CVs, and we bundle those and provide those documents to all of our member companies, and they can take that back to the hiring managers or their HR departments as well.
That's right. And then this is Toshi. So in a competitive environment, these relationships that are built between our member companies, engineers, and the students here at all three universities provides another key advantage for our members. And speaking to the reasons why our member companies join, it's really a myriad of reasons. Some join really quite exclusively for the relationships that they build with the students. Others, it's a mixture of the research and relationships.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we commonly hear from other centers and the National Science Foundation is that these relationships that build through the IUCRC lead to additional directed projects outside the IUCRC. Is that something that you've experienced within NIST, where companies that are members of the center are going outside of the IUCRC itself to engage faculty to do directed projects for the company without it being under the IUCRC rules?
So this is Toshi. So yes, so that's another advantage of being a member of the center, is that member companies can establish relationships with faculty, and they may identify pre-competitive research that is of great interest to their organization, and then essentially spin that out into a standard one-on-one research contract with that faculty member at the university for just that reason. So that is a key model, and so we've had faculty and members employ that. We also have another mechanism of enhancement funds, where our member organizations can put in additional funds to further accelerate a selected project in the MIST Center.
Okay. Thank you. How do you communicate with the member companies outside of the 2 meetings a year? What's the normal way of communicating with them on project updates and other types of information about what activities are occurring within the IUCRC?
This is Shelby, and that's a great question. So one of the things that we do is we have a mentorship relationship with each of our industry members. So we typically have somebody delegated from a specific research area or subject matter expert that will mentor 1, 2, or however many projects they find interested in the center. And each month we will have an update call between the faculty, the graduate students or undergraduate students working on that project, and that mentor from the member company. And again, that happens on a monthly basis. There can be additional meetings if required. We've had some member companies that have taken interest in projects such that they're meeting every 2 weeks to maybe help spin a project up faster. There's oftentimes some level of not just IP sharing, but even product sharing. Maybe it's providing a different type of ink or what have you to try more targeted or different experiments on. So this type of back and forth relationship is very collaborative. It's very beneficial, obviously, for the member company, but also for the students who are getting real-world targeted mentorship.
We also have monthly update reports that are submitted from our MIST Center to all of our member companies that detail the updates for all projects in the center.
Yes, thank you for clarifying, Toshi. So yes, you don't just receive the 1 project or 2 projects that you're interested in. We send the update slides for every project and a PDF book that's indexed by project to all member companies. So you can follow from afar if you want every project. It really offers a lot of flexibility. You can be very granular with your participation in many projects, or you can follow the one that you're primarily interested in. It's really, you can be involved as much or as little as your time permits. Are there any more questions?
Yes, Shelby, I'm sorry, I was on mute. So a question regarding how many people can attend the IAB meetings from a company, and then also, do you find that most of the members companies have a single lead representative who serves as the liaison within the company to share the results? Or how does that, what's your experience with your current members in terms of how they manage information flow internally?
So I'll start with your second question first about having a liaison at the member company. So the way that, since we have 16 member companies, we require one point of contact for that organization. However, we find that typically those focals will delegate specific relationships. So while companies typically have their one project, they also have numerous other projects that they're interested in, and they'll pull experts from within their organization to mentor those projects where maybe they're not able to dedicate the time themselves. So to your second question about how many people can attend the meetings, from a member company, there is no restriction on the number of participants that can attend the meeting. For guests, we have a rule that companies may send guests, plural, one time. All guests must be approved by the Industry Advisory Board, and what we're really trying to do there is not to force you into a decision or to be restrictive unnecessarily. We really want to make sure we're not getting people trolling any kind of IP or who are coming to the meetings without a sincere interest and joining and collaborating with the rest of the member companies. And that's been a rule that has been successful and been implemented by our Industry Advisory Board, and we've had no rejections that come to my mind. Everybody has been very open and fair with this process.
Okay, great. So I have one remaining question. So if anybody who's on the call has any questions, please go ahead and ask them now. So a question about joining mid-year. Can companies join mid-year and are dues prorated, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So companies can join mid-year, and the way that we typically handle that is they could obviously join any of the existing projects, but typically we'll have that individual or that company work with a faculty member to propose a specific project that will be introduced into the MIST Center. We do require that that get approved by 2/3 of the Industry Advisory Board, but again, this model scales with value by the more people that join, so those are typically approved in quick order. There may be time constraints if you join, say, in September and you want to get a full project completed by December, but what we can do is actually carry that on into the following year through a no-cost extension. We can certainly facilitate this in any number of ways, and we can talk about those logistics, but this happens with great regularity, and it's something that we're well-versed at managing.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for presenting about the MIST Center today. We have a few more slides for our participants to provide some additional information about upcoming webinars and information on the series. We will have a survey after the webinar, and we would ask that you kindly take that survey to help us improve the quality of the product that we're offering to participants. We also want to remind everyone of the next IUCRC webinar, which is on the Center for Advanced Research in Drying card, which will take place September 5th at the same time from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. I want to also thank my UIDP colleagues, Caroline Black and Liz Kennel, for helping with today's logistics, Dr. Stuart Weitzman for providing consulting support to the presenters, and to David Grewell from Iowa State and now North Dakota State, who is the co-PI for this webinar series award. So with that, I would welcome all of you to join our listserv, which is information provided at the top where you keep track of our information, and I wish everyone a successful rest of your week.